There should be sound on this. I'm just going to pause it for a second. There it is. Okay. So I have a choice. I can watch this little guy. Now she's going the other way at the same time. So you can see while she's doing that, he's running around the other side. And they're both growing up. This is a little love story. He runs off. He wants to be part of nature, and for her, she wants to be a ballerina. And if you get lost, this little butterfly leads you back to that. So as he's growing up, so is she. She's climbing up the other side of the tree. And you can go explore the tree. And there's our butterfly again, leading us back. Catches her. They keep having an influence on each other. The stupid dog pulls them away just when they want to be together. She's dancing. He's climbing up this waterfall. Find one another. And that's the dog with the longest lifespan on earth. So, something that I realized when I was working at Google was that there's this whole new world that I was part of. And Ollie Johnston, who was my mentor, he was one of Walt Disney's 9 old men. They'd created Snow White and Pinocchio, and he really built this whole art form of animation on the backs of these men. And I started at Disney as a 20-year-old guy at a time where they were looking to pass this on to a new generation. And it was just an incredible apprentice-master relationship. And this baton was passed on. And Ollie said at one point, he said, Glenn, because he was an old guy, he was 70s there. Glenn, someday you're going to do greater things than us. I was like, oh, why did he say that? How are you going to do better than Pinocchio? And so I carried this monkey on my back until wonderful Rebecca called. And I was at Google. And she asked if I would participate with her in a presentation where I could take these 12 principles of Disney animation and apply them to user interface. I was like, user interface? Wow, I haven't really thought about that at all. And then Ollie's words stuck in my head as he said, you're going to do greater things than us. And I realized greater wasn't in terms of quality, it was application. It was taking something that, these principles that were passed on as a baton and pass it on to new fields, like this field, like this room, which is why I'm here, because this is a wonderful opportunity to take these same principles that were given to me and share them with you. But the reason I say that I believe these characters exist before I designed them is that that's been my experience on every character. I never would have said that before. But there's this moment in creating a character, say whether it's Ariel or Aladdin or the Beast in this case. I must have spent 6 months designing different versions of him, and people would say, "Oh, is that the Beast?" I said, "No, that's not him." It's like, well, why not? It's just not him. I just know it's not him. Actually, I was at the London Zoo here in Regent's Park drawing the wolves there and taking different inspiration from different animals, and I had my whole office set up with images of, there's a buffalo head on my wall, there's a wild boar head on that wall, and I had gorilla photos, and all of these animals were coming together to create something in my mind. One of the assistants said, "So what's the Beast going to look like?" "I don't know, I was really frustrated." Well, it's okay. I like this buffalo head shape. And I just sketched out, there's kind of a heavy sadness to the buffalo. Maybe because his head was on my wall, maybe that was it. But this bear-like body, and he had this gorilla crest. But the expressions of the brow were going to have to be very emotive, and so I was drawing that, and so there's kind of a gorilla-like brow, but the muzzle of this boar. Now this guy was standing behind me, this assistant, and I was just explaining exactly like I am to you. There's these tusks, though. I want kind of a wild tusk. I kind of like the beard of a buffalo, but he's got to be somewhat soft, so bells might hug him, and we got to have a mane of a lion, say, the body of a bear. The horns were a combination of a whole variety of different animals, and the ears, well, is Belle going to really love this guy? This is not possible. I needed to learn a lesson with this movie, that beauty's only skin deep, because I didn't believe that Belle would ever love this guy. So I'll soften him. I'll give him cow ears here. Makes him a little friendlier. But the eyes are the window to the soul, and there's a prince trapped inside. And the Beast is the same way. And as soon as I drew that, it was like, oh, that's him. And I just pointed to the guy behind. I said, that's it right there. I recognize him. And this was the way design happens. There's a intuitive sense that you get.
Mm-hmm. And I know for me that I've always found so many of these techniques from Disney to be relevant to what we're doing today as UX and visual designers. And really, if we're going to talk about motion and start somewhere, it's with Disney. They developed these 12 principles of animation, which I find so relevant because of the way that they depict realistic movement and emotional engagement. I feel like half of these principles were based on the way that things move and behave in real life, because Disney knew that when an audience would be watching something on screen, they expected things to move in a way that felt natural, like they did in real life. And then on the other hand, I feel like there's so many layers to Disney's storytelling. They focus on this emotional engagement. It's how I feel like they became the first people to develop full-length animated feature films with characters that were so developed and believable and relatable and captured an audience's heart. And that's how this all starts to come together. Giving feedback is important because it influences people's trust in your product, and it's really satisfying and delightful for users to see over time. Not only that, it adds a tactile element, so it feels less like you're just tapping on a piece of glass, and more like you're interacting with these real elements on screen that feel like a natural extension of a user. It's even more powerful when multiple elements are working together to try to convey something to you. So a technique that we can reference from Disney here is exaggeration.
Exaggeration is a way of really bringing home an emotion, an idea for the audience. Now, like if Beast here is going to respond, let's say he's at the door and he's waiting for Belle to come and she just said, I'm not coming down to dinner. And he's what? Apparently I make funny faces when I draw, I guess. When I would animate the Beast, I'd go home and my neck would be hurting. I was like, oh, I was telling my wife, I think I have a problem with my neck and jaw. I don't know what it is. She said, well, what are you doing all day? And I was like, well, I'm drawing the Beast and I'm all hunched over. And I realized that's what it is. But let's say Beast is responding, and he, what? Well, okay, so that's somewhat clear. But how do you really exaggerate and bring that home so no one can miss it? Well, there's this, one of the first things I learned was squash and stretch, where Beast, you go the other way first and you exaggerate this where he's coming down and everything squashes. There's this flexibility to him and his mouth crunches there. So you're getting this build for it. And it's something, this is kind of a crazy look for the Beast, but it's something that you feel and you don't see. It's more of what has an impact to you. So in the end, instead of just going from this to that, now you go from this to that. And there's this wonderful little pop.
Mm-hmm. That has always stuck with me, the way that you describe feedback as something that is felt and not forward. Feed forward is really just a form of hinting. It's visual affordance. Think of it as what happens before someone might even interact. It helps convey possible interactions and what to expect and how things work and fit together. It helps nudge people through the correct sequence of actions so that they can avoid confusion and better accomplish their goals. Often these are really subtle details, but the payoff is huge. People might not even realize that they're happening. They just feel like they intuitively understood what they were supposed to do or where they were supposed to go. So the key here is anticipating people's needs and where you want to take them and what they have to do. So anticipation is the next principle that we'll reference.
So let's suppose Mickey is just going to go pick up his ball. Well, as he reaches in to grab the ball, naturally, the most direct way is just for that hand to stretch out and he grabs it. So he's going to get the ball like that. Okay. The problem is, if you're not ready for it, you're going to get lost, left behind. And when you anticipate, you signal to the audience what's about to happen. Like, let's suppose Mickey's preparing to do that action. What you want to do is send a signal, a symbol of he's about to reach out. Oh, I got to put his thumb on the wrong side there. No, that's right. So he reaches out. So it goes up and then down. So now you see, oh, he's about to grab, and you get this wonderful little arc that comes over and grabs. That kind of anticipation is really vital for not losing your audience. In Duet, there's a moment, there's a moment where the boy is in the tree and the girl's in the tree, and when he jumps out of the tree and climbs down, I found that the audience was completely lost. They didn't know, suddenly he was gone, and they didn't realize where he went. And what I felt like I needed to do was signal to the audience what was about to happen in subtle ways. Sometimes this can be incredibly subtle. Is it ready to go? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So she's going to leave, and as he goes, what I did, I used to have him just exit, but what I ended up doing was putting this little pause there of having him look back. It just was enough of a pause for the audience to look and see, oh, he's heading out somewhere, and then he left, and that made all the difference for people to follow it.
Yeah, I think the key here is not just assuming that people know what you know and where they have to go next. It's taking that extra step and that care to think through all the little moments where they can benefit from that little extra hint. So for example, in this photo app, the first time that you land on the screen after the templates fall into place, you see this little peek at the controls that live behind the home screen. So it's a subtle cue to people that that's where they can start to interact if they just push the screen out of the way so that they don't feel lost. Google Translate, for example, hints at something like you can start speaking now. So you see these pulsing rings that signal to you that it's listening so that you can start speaking and it can translate for you. Pinterest uses what they call skeleton pins. So before something even loads, they show the average color of the pin that's about to be there. So it's kind of nice because it signals to people that something's on its way and don't think that anything is stuck. Facebook does something similar when you see a little glow on the text before the content has loaded. So all of those little moments are just really reassuring for people that everything is working properly. And lastly, Monument Valley. So the first time that you land on this home screen, the castle is what I call spatial awareness. Spatial awareness is all about orienting your user with their environment and clarifying the relationship between elements. It's especially important on smaller screens because you have to properly strategize how to use what little screen real estate you have in order to reduce complexity. If you think about it, every single environment that someone interacts with, they have to first learn that space. So it's your responsibility as a designer to help people transition through that and make sense of that world so that they can understand where things come from, where they can go next, and where they can find them again. If you don't, it feels like a sudden change to people, and sudden change just doesn't happen in the real world. So the key here is giving logic to that environment and always giving attention to where people have come and where they're going next. So another technique we can reference here is staging.
Yeah, there's this, staging is a really interesting thing because you are constantly bringing the audience into your world so that they understand the space that they're working in. So, in this case, I was going to animate this scene in part of your world where Ariel swims up and she wants to be part of that world up there. And I was about 33 years old and I'm animating a mermaid. I'm 16, I'm not a 16-year-old girl, but there I am doing it. I'm living in the skin. An animator is somebody that is an actor with a pencil. You live in the skin of the characters you draw. And Ariel was swimming up to the surface, and she reaches out, and I was like, oh, I don't want her to reach out to the audience, and then, oh,
go down. And it's like everybody's going to know how sappy and sentimental I am, and I tried to resist it, but I couldn't stop Ariel. She did it anyway. So what I'm going to show you is this little clip of animation, and it's in pencil, and it's a really lousy quality because you're used to HD and everything, but this was really cool back then because it was off of video. But this is a rough pencil test where I'm drawing very rough. So we're going to take a look at Ariel.
Some answers, what's a fire and why does it, what's the word? Burn, when's it my turn? Wouldn't I love to explore that shore up above? Out of the sea, wish I could be part of that world.
So Ariel was breaking this plane as she's reaching out, and this is staging. Sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's that way. And years later, I was speaking at California Institute of the Arts and to the animation department, and a girl came up and said, "Mr. Keane, I have to tell you, there's this moment in Little Mermaid where Ariel, she's singing and she reaches out to the audience. You probably don't remember." I said, yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Well, I was 4 years old, and I was standing in the movie theater, and when that came on, I just couldn't help. I stood up, and when Ariel was reaching out, I reached out my hands to take her, to pull her so she could be part of my world. I was like, I could kiss you.
User focus. User focus is all about guiding people's attention and clarifying change states. It's all about these transitions in hierarchy at each moment in time. And it puts emphasis on the right elements depending on what the objective is at that moment. You'll often see something like the use of contextual controls, so these important actions you always want to have on hand, and you know that they're there, but you don't necessarily have to see them all the time until the moment that they're needed, and then they become the focus. When designing for user focus, it may not be as simple as just bringing something to the forefront and making it really bold and obvious, but think through how every single layer of what's happening on screen is also responding to that and further conveying clarity in that moment. So clarity is the next technique we'll reference here.
Yeah, clarity is really important. Ollie kept saying to me, because my drawings would be really rough and scribbly, and he'd say, "Glenn, don't draw clean," because I kept trying to reduce the lines. He said, "I don't care about clean. Draw clear. It has to be clear. Your image may be complex, but that's okay if it's clear. And it may be very simple, but that's not okay if it's not clear." In this case here, we've got Mickey in a little short called Little Whirlwind, and he's dealing with this little whirlwind that's creating havoc with these leaves. So now Mickey is going to do something that you're not expecting, but there's this wonderful feeling of want in that space, staging. You know he's going to head over to this basket, and he does in an instant. And what he's going to do is he's going to bring out a hammer. Well, you weren't expecting a hammer. So, but he does it. How does he do it? Well, it doesn't matter how. He's going to have it. The important thing is that you know he's got it because you weren't expecting it. So the size of the hammer gets
huge. And the nail, suddenly it's like magic, but it's okay because he reached somewhere and pulled it out, and you buy it. And so then he goes into this hammering, whacking the thing in there. Now he's got the hammer. What the heck is he going to do with it? Well, just go ahead and shove it. It's done. So it's really clear. You don't miss it.
Right. I know that you often describe moments like this as the plausible impossible. The moments where, as long as it's for the benefit of a user, you can get away with some things. So moments like contextual controls. Like I said, these important little actions you want to have on hand, you don't necessarily have to see them until the moment that they're needed. So Pinterest, for example, hold down your finger a little bit and these buttons pop out. You don't question how they got there. Paper notifications. So what I like here is the sequence of different elements working together to convey that transition. You tap on the globe, it first bounces a little bit, then the tray slides out full screen. And there's also a little glow to the title there. So it's really delightful, just the sequence of things that lead up to that moment of focus. Peak calendar app. So what's nice here is that as you're making these selections, they chose not to use an out-of-the-box selection tool. Instead, they have every element on screen get out of the way. Your selections become really bright and obvious, and then everything collapses back into place when you're finished. And lastly, Yahoo Weather. So I've always thought this was a clever execution of motion. They're using something like motion to convey wind speed and time of day. So at a glance, this is the first thing that catches your eye. You don't have to read everything numerically. It's just delightful that you can get a sense from the pace at which the windmills are turning, how windy it's going to be that day. So that is user focus, all about bringing clarity to each moment in time. And that brings us to our last principle, which is probably our favorite to talk about, the hardest to design for, sometimes the most undervalued, I feel like, in our discipline, and also a mysterious thing to design for, which is your brand tone of voice. These are the details that start to add expression and personality and identity throughout the experience. It's what feels authentic and ownable for the brands that you design for, and it's a moment to differentiate yourselves from every other experience out there. So admittedly, this is less about the functional benefits and more about the emotional, but it can be equally as important to what you do. I have found that in the past year, after I've been trying to apply these principles in my work and observing everyone else's process, that this is often where we have to start. You need a point of view on what your tone of voice is and what it feels like before you even start designing everything else, because everything else afterwards just feels more authentic, it feels cohesive, it helps your team understand the type of experience that they're designing for and how they want it to feel. It even helps your clients start to imagine what that experience will be. So the same way that at the start of a project we often focus on copy guidelines and we say if a brand were to speak to you, what would it say? Think about if a brand were to move, what would it feel like? These are often surprise and delight moments that become these brandable moments and experience that stick with people, but even beyond these, the rest of this app's experience, for example, feels the same way, whether it's whimsical or strong and bold and powerful. What works for one brand doesn't work for another. And if you think about all of the sites and apps and everything that you engage with day to day and why you keep using them, there's a chance that people are always gravitating towards the same few. And it's because they have more than just a good user experience. It's because they do something more. They enable you, they delight you, they have emotional appeal. So appeal is the last principle we'll reference here.
Yeah, so appeal, I kept hearing this word when I got to Disney about appeal. It's like, what is appeal? It's this magnetism that draws you into it, but what is that magnetic power? I mean, there's a feeling of rightness when you look at a design. It feels right. In music, it's the dun 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 dun. That's right, of course, it's inevitable. But how do you design to that? And I was struggling with this, but I noticed my wife had this sense of design, this rightness. I'd be talking to her, and we'd be sitting in the living room talking, and she'd kind of look past me, and as we're talking, she'd get up and walk right past me and just kind of straighten this picture, and then come back and we'd talk some more. And I'm thinking, what's going on in that head of hers? So I thought I'd experiment with this, and so we were at our kitchen table, and there was a salt shaker, a pepper shaker, and a little sugar bowl, and different sizes. And she got up to leave to go get whatever, and I took the sugar bowl and the salt and pepper shaker, and I moved it all symmetrical, equidistant, which is anathema in design. You do not want everything to be symmetrical. So I put that there like that. So she came back, and we're just talking, and as we're talking, she just casually reaches over and pushes one of the pepper shaker a little bit closer. I said, "What? Why'd you do that?" She said, "What? What? You moved that pepper shaker." "I don't know. Why are you acting so weird?" "Why did you do that?" She said, "I don't know. It just felt better." And I realized there is this sense of harmony. And when everything is in harmony, it's like perfect notes on a chord, that there's a rightness. And everybody knows when they're hearing a sour note. Everybody knows when they're visually looking at a sour note. There was an animator named Freddie Moore who really created the look of Disney animation. He was a young guy in his 20s, no training, just came naturally, the sense of appeal. So Mickey before him was like this. He was more of kind of a rat. And if you saw Mickey, it was kind of like that. Actually, every time I draw that now, I kind of like that. I don't know why. But with Freddie, all of these elements are about equal. It's kind of like what I did with that salt and pepper shaker. And what Freddie naturally did is taking the theme of a circle like this and rolling that up and pulling this nose up higher. And now that mouth fit up into that head. Instead of this, it came up into that. And the eyes, instead of being so far apart, he moved them close to that nose, almost like there's a gravitational pull to these different elements. And the brows actually follow the shape of the head, and that mouth pushes up. Everything's got its place and pushes up and create that little cheek. And this was the basis of all the dwarves and the basis of all Disney animation and appeal.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, it sometimes feels like a mysterious thing. You know when you don't have it, and you know when you have it, and you don't know how to get there sometimes. But when you do have it, it makes all the difference in the world, and it really is what becomes ownable for you. So again, some examples of how this translates. Take something like Snapchat, where these little ghosts have become so iconic in every moment of the experience, and they become something you look forward to. The whimsical experience of that translates into every other interaction with it, too. Airbnb, this sense of discovery and living there and finding these different homes around the world. This sense is even found even in little details, like whenever you search, you see these little illustrations of different homes come up, and it becomes something you start to look forward to in a way. Starbucks, so they have this ownable part of their experience where you get these rewards, these little stars, they get tossed into a cup and you can shake it around or drag it with your finger, and it's something that, it isn't a required part of that app. You can just display the number of rewards someone's have, but it's become such an iconic part of it, and it's something that people truly enjoy playing with. And it's important to find those brandable moments in what you do. Same with Slack. I feel like it's kind of why it's become so addicting in a way, these little Easter eggs and moments throughout the entire experience that are just delightful to see, and it's kind of like how we interact and text each other in real life. It's why it's been so natural to use for people and so fun to use. So that's your brand tone of voice, your expression and personality and an appeal through your experience. These 5 principles are how you can start to craft an experience that is both realistic and emotional in your work. And taking into account the proper techniques and moments to apply motion, I believe as designers it's our responsibility to start solving the gaps between those extreme states and concentrating on the characters in your work. But the characters that you're designing for aren't just the ones on screen. You're also taking into account this human element because your main character is your user. And no matter whether it's films, books, sites, apps, photographs, no matter the context or the medium, our objectives are all the same in the end because we're all trying to have this two-way dialogue.
And recently I've been working in virtual reality, drawing in space, which is very similar to the way I feel and think when I'm animating. But what I realize is happening right now is that there's all of these wonderful little creative groups are working on virtual reality over at Google and Oculus Rift, but we're all like a little island out there. A bunch of creative people working on this, but there's a mainland of everybody over here that keeps saying, yeah, but it's really cool, but what the heck? I mean, how do you use that? What? They don't get it. And what's wonderful is in this room are the people who are the bridge builders between that and taking people and so they can relate to that world. So I just wanted to end with this last little clip. It's a wonderful new world that desperately needs you and in other ways that I'm not even thinking of, and what the future is holding for you to apply these skills that we've been talking about. So here's this little clip of me drawing with tilt brush technique, a tool developed by Google.
When you draw, you're expressing something that's real and visceral. By making a line, it's sort of a seismograph of your soul. I was at Disney for about 38 years and was given an opportunity to animate Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Tarzan, Pocahontas. These are not drawings, these are real characters as they exist in my own life. Picasso said, when I was young, I could draw and paint like Raphael. It's taken me a lifetime to learn to draw like a child. An artist's spirit is that freedom and fearlessness of being a child. I was planted in the perfect nest to grow up in. My dad was a cartoonist who created the family circus. He was a kid. He was just like a big kid. When my son Max was just a little guy, he said, "Dad, teach me to draw." I taught him the same way my dad did. Dad drew circles and then wrote expressions under each one. Within like a half hour, he came back and they were all filled out. Afraid, the eyes are looking in two different directions as if like, ooh. The key to doing those drawings was asking himself, so how do I feel? That's the thing that you gotta hang on to, that full immersion into the drawing. When I animate, there's a frustration that I have, wishing that the flatness of the paper would go away and that I could actually dive in. Animating the Beast, I became the Beast. I remember going home at night and my jaw just hurting because Beast all day, he's talking like this and my back is all bent over and my neck was sore, and because I'm being him. I would draw not to do a drawing, but so that I could step in and live in that world. Today, all the rules have changed. By putting tools in your hand that can create in virtual reality, I can put goggles on and I just step into the paper and now I'm drawing in it. North, south, east, west, all directions are open now. Just immersing myself in space is more like a dance. What is this
amazing new world I just stepped into. When I draw in virtual reality, I draw all the characters real life size. They are that size in my imagination. The character can turn. Ariel is actually turning in space. And even if you take the goggles off, I'm still remembering she's right there. It's real. That doorway to the imagination is open a little wider. The edges of the paper are no longer there. This is not a flat drawing. This is sculptural drawing. Making art in three-dimensional space is an entirely new way of thinking for any artist. What does this mean for storytelling? I love the idea as an animator that you can be anything that you can imagine. And as a kid, you're completely free. The soul of any kind of a creative art form is the freedom.